Good evening. This is the General Bylaw Review Committee. Today is January 27th, approximately 6 p.m. And we're having our second meeting. By way of a little bit of background, at our last meeting, we established a three-member committee. And long and short, we met, we recommended Eric Bailey. We had received 3 applicants from the pool of town meeting members, and all 3 were highly qualified. We noted that, but decisions have to be made, and we thought Eric would be an appropriate person for the group. And so we're now, yes.
Before we start, we need to take roll call attendance and everything.
Oh,
has to
fair
occur
enough.
by roll
Out of
call
practice.
because we're
Oh, you're
hybrid.
right. You're right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thank you. So let's do a attendance roll call. So Ron Ruth, member of the committee, maybe Eric.
Eric Bailey, town meeting member, precinct A.
Michael Fee, town moderator.
Louise Miller, counselor.
Karen Calton, representative for the finance committee. Kathy Dowd, select board.
Proceed, town council. Miles
Um,
Tippins, Sport Services Manager.
Connie Barr,
Connie?
and I need to go at 6:30 because we have a school committee meeting called to vote the budget, so I'll be checking out then.
So we'll still have a forum. Yep.
Yeah, and Kate Fitzpatrick, town manager.
Now, if we could go back to, I think I was at the point of saying that we had selected Eric as a recommendation to the full committee. And certainly put that on the table and see if there is a motion to approve Eric as a member of the committee, the town meeting representative. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Second, and is there discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor of selecting Eric?
We need to do roll call on every vote.
Thank you very much. Resigning shortly.
We gotta make a motion for you to resign. Nobody makes it, you're stuck.
So we'll go around and vote. I'll not do myself first, but Michael?
I vote yes.
Louise Miller, yes.
Karen Calton, yes. Kathy Dowd, yes.
Connie?
Connie Barr, yes.
Ron Ruth, yes. So.
Thank you.
Ethel?
Welcome.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to calling on you to vote. Then our next order of business. Yeah,
Is to swear in Mr. Bailey.
exactly. And then turn that over to Louise.
If you would, Mr. Bailey. And repeat after me. I, please state your name.
I, Eric Bailey,
Do hereby swear
do hereby swear
that I will discharge my duties
that I will discharge my duties
as a member of the General Bylaw Review Committee
as a member of the General Bylaw Review Committee
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my abilities,
fairly and impartially,
fairly and impartially,
according to the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts
according to the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts
and the charter and bylaws of the town of Needham.
and the charter and bylaws of the town of Needham.
You are duly sworn in.
Thank you.
You may now participate.
Does he have a song? Does it-
I dance.
Well, then, moving along, so our next item is overview of the work plan ahead, which is kind of a beginnings to, hopefully everybody was able to read section 1 of the bylaws in preparation for the meeting. And certainly some of the point of that task was not just to get us started, but also to get us focused on the process of reading the bylaw and in the context of the, since we're a review committee only. We discussed at the last meeting that we're not a committee charged with policy changes or to make policy recommendations or policy changes to the bylaws. And but we thought that going forward with step 1 here, just reading the section 1 would develop some thoughts as to issues that jump out to us. And unless somebody wants to start, I have a few comments, but if somebody has any strong reactions to their to reading the section or strong views in terms of what they want to say before we can launch into this process. I'll just throw out that one of the items that jumps off the page when you read, at least in my mind, when you read section 1, is there's a fair amount of references to documents being delivered in printable form, deposited somewhere. There's a lot of contemplation of the written word as we all grew up knowing it on paper. And just something that we may want to think about and talk about is in a general review of the bylaws, do we deal with the change in technology that a lot of paperwork is going to not come as paperwork, will come as electronic, will come as emails, will come as PDFs, so you all know the situation. But in any event, just for a discussion topic, let me throw that out. Whether we ought to be dealing with that in a definitional sense. Because there are definitions at the end of the bylaws and just, sweeping definition, address the change in technology that print means email unless the law otherwise requires or something to that effect. But anyway, let me throw that out for conversation.
I actually had that in mind when I was reviewing, but I didn't know any specific cases that I thought were problematic. Like, for example, it says, the town clerk shall cause to be delivered or mailed to town meeting members in 122. Like, delivered could certainly reflect email. And I think in terms of the definition, we'd have to decide whether mail is physical postal mail only, or if it could potentially be email. But I actually didn't notice a specific reference to like printed, other than the attested copies, which I assume have a legal definition.
Yeah, I mean, we revised this bylaw some years ago. I wish I could remember specifically to, eliminate the physical delivery of the warrant to each house and to replace it with the posting on the website and the delivered to each, town meeting member. So I agree with Eric. I think that provision is probably sufficient to email as delivery. I think you're also raising a general
Oh,
question,
absolutely.
right, as to whether we should be mindful of that, which I agree with.
Mhm.
If there are other spots. I mean, the one that stood out for me in this one is, causing a synopsis of all town meeting articles to be printed in the local newspaper.
Oh, yes, I meant to flag that, yes.
I was doing some research as to whether we have a local newspaper. I don't think we do.
We use the Hometown Weekly.
Is that considered the local newspaper?
Yeah. Yep,
Okay,
right now,
all right.
today.
I was thinking of a Needham. I didn't know if it had to be a Needham newspaper, but isn't that broader than Needham? There's articles in there about
Focus
Millis
mostly.
and Medfield.
Well, yeah.
Is it still like, given that we have a pretty good website, is this still a requirement from the state?
So the only thing I would say with respect to relying on website and email only, you miss a lot of people. A lot of people do come in because they've read something in the newspaper. They saw something in the newspaper. So if it's not that one, some other, something else, but the website alone, especially since you don't see notices from the town clerk. Right? I mean, you have to go to the town clerk's page to see the notice. So you have to know to look for it. That would be my only comment, whereas this just shows up. And people see it. Are we going in order? We're just kind
My
of
thought-
going through that because.
I was just throwing this out as a general topic because I think it
It shows up in 113
goes all
too,
through.
where the committees are gonna deposit with the town librarian their working papers.
Right.
That's kind of an example, I think, Ron.
Right.
But what is more difficult for me, rather than mailing to town meeting members, is 1.2.1, where we actually have to take a physical copy of the warrant and post it in physically in 20 public places, and the constables have a really hard time finding those, like, they're telling me they are nailing the warrants to a tree.
Like the old days.
Like, the old days, exactly.
Nothing changes.
Because there's no, so maybe the issue is we don't have a public bulletin board
Right.
somewhere.
Does Massachusetts require anything
General
here,
laws.
or can we do anything we want? Like, in other words, arbitrarily, could we change 20 to 1, or would that put us out of compliance with Commonwealth?
I have to say, I noted that one too, you know, because who even knows where they are, who's looking at those? I think the physical newspaper is something that people who maybe of a certain age and are not tech savvy,
Right.
we
Yeah,
still
I
want to
agree with that.
communicate to them via the newspaper. But this posting of copies and not less than 20, that does seem onerous and really superfluous.
They post in the public buildings that are open, but like Louise and I were talking, they used to post them in schools, but
And
schools are
now,
locked
Right.
now.
now the schools are locked, that's what they tell me, so they just, you know, post them outside the school, which lasts all of a day and a half, maybe if they're lucky, right? And if the weather's bad, I mean, they told me the stuff goes fine immediately.
Well, I have a question. Is there any need for redundancy in paperwork? For certain things? I mean, it seems to me that a lot of this is presupposed because there's certain time limits and different things like that. And if we're all relying on electronic means, that just worries me from a kind of documentation and compilation of all that over time. Like if it's just gonna be stored on some cloud and then when it's gone, we don't have any.
Oh, a record that the
Right.
meeting was actually.
Right, I just get
noticed.
worried about that.
We would still keep a copy.
Okay. Of every email that you sent to everybody, proving that you sent it or anything?
Oh, no, so that's a whole other issue, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue, is made, you know, we don't know that anybody's receiving anything. I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wonder, my understanding of the whole concept of true and attested is that it's guaranteed to be the original and not modified in any way, and the constables are literally attesting to that fact. But if the town publishes to the website and puts it in the newspaper, is that sufficient?
Assuming the general laws don't have a requirement.
That's exactly right, assuming that, and presumably there would be a copy here with you, Louise, as town clerk.
There always will be.
So anyone that didn't trust either the website or the Hometown Weekly could come here to town hall and see essentially the master version, as it were, the original.
Although the point of posting
Right.
is to draw attention that there's a meeting coming,
Yes,
and you don't, unless you know there's a meeting coming, you don't.
Which
Go to
was
the
more
town clerk.
important when everybody could come. Right, but
Right.
now, I mean, I guess they cannot come, but
Right.
So
it was before the
the other thing I
representative.
would say is with vote by mail. What has happened last year and then this year is everybody gets a postcard in the mail saying there are going to be the following election.
Mhm.
I think voter turnout is much higher because everybody's received that postcard in the mail. You can post it on the website, but that sits on your dining room table or wherever you open your mail. And
So like send a card, you say send a card out with a link that says the warrant is posted.
it's posted there, and here are the dates of the like you could just have, actually, I was thinking we could do it with the census.
Hmm.
Here are what the dates are gonna be, here are what the links are. And now people can save that piece of paper, get rid of the dog because right now we send the dog registration with it, we made that all electronic.
yeah, that's a brilliant idea. You could send a postcard with the web link and a QR code.
Mhm.
That would take people directly to the warrant on the website.
The meeting dates are sent to me with my town census at home.
What's that? They send them with your
Yeah.
town census, yeah, so we could do the same thing, because we know what they're gonna be.
Even special, the typical,
Yeah, they did. They have their
Okay.
fall special.
so then it would only be a special that would
Right.
be. Right.
And just to
I was just double checking that there's no requirement for a particular number of posting locations in the general law.
Seem to be.
There is not. It just says you have to post the constables need to post the warrant in accordance with the bylaws. So we have some flexibility, it appears.
You are up over here somewhere?
No, I need that. I didn't sign it.
You did not, you
I
should
did.
not.
Yeah,
You
sure,
did.
because it's your own.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, no.
So you could lower the number from 20 to, the public buildings that people go in, like the library
Yeah.
and senior center and the Rosemary and Town
Yeah.
Hall.
The train
five.
stations.
5, yeah.
Well, but even 5. Like, aside from the police station, like, what are the ones that we know are going to be open? Town hall, like, I think we need to
Library,
think about, yeah,
Center at the
and be
Heights,
specific about
Rosemary.
Oh, the
what
center,
they are.
yeah, so.
Piece that out.
Yeah. I'm kind of sprinkle them around town,
Could hang one at the.
RPS.
everybody's there. Okay,
Do you notice actually on the RTS, on the signage there, do you say there's a town meeting coming?
On the electronic
The
side,
electronics. Oh, all right.
and we have a new sign at, Peace Ave. And there's one at Fire Station too, so.
Right, okay. Well, actually.
Ron,
The tree.
would it be appropriate to bring up another overarching comment that I saw?
Sure.
guys, put it on.
So one of the things I noticed is we have a pronoun problem. I'm sure I'm not the only one that noticed this. Chairman, his.
Sure.
And I think we just need to do a comprehensive update of the entire document and eliminate the gender terms.
Well, Kate and I had a meeting and 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, Kate gave me some history on that because that.
So
is-
we did a whole, when we redid the charter in 2004, we eliminated all the pronouns and we took out chairman and they put it back in. But when we went back in 2018 to change select board, they agreed to change to chair. The town can do what it wants in the bylaw, I assume, but that's why the charter's that way.
When you say they. you
The
mean
House Council changed it all back.
Yeah, the legislature. So not that we don't have authority to do it, but. I
Yeah,
thought that
that's
was-
why but yeah, the chairman jumped out at me too.
The,
What would you change it to? His, her, or something?
I would try to avoid the pronoun at all, but I would prefer their. Just the third person, not assumed binary. But I think in most cases, you could eliminate the pronoun altogether. Deemed necessary by the moderator in the fulfillment of the duties of the moderator's office, as opposed to his office. But if that's not possible, I would recommend there to be most inclusive.
there's that approach to it, or there's the approach of doing the definitional thing that's overarching and then just throw it out for discussion, because one is less cumbersome. But leaves the language in place.
I guess I think if you did it definitionally, there isn't much point. You know what I mean? Because it's the text itself
Yeah,
as people
yeah,
read
I-
it.
Yeah, I didn't
You know,
even realize
so
there were definitions until I just read it
Yeah,
now.
I
There
don't
are,
know how many people are studying the definition, so. Yeah, I would say either do it or don't do it.
Just people stub their toe.
There's statute, so what does the legislature do? It's not a narrative document, right? It's a statute, so. I'm just curious we have freedom, I think, a lot of freedom in a lot of other town publications. I'm just curious what this legislature does for statutes. If you want to be consistent.
And study it, but
I
just as a reader of statutes, you don't hit the pronouns very often. Usually the phraseology is constructed in a way to avoid gender-based pronouns. Based on those two broad points, it seems like we have some consensus to try and address those. To a certain, well, let me not go so broadly. On the gender issue. Pronouns. Is there an agreement to try to view to, if that's a worthwhile goal to pursue?
We might want to look at what, I would personally want to look at what other towns have done, and how the legislature handles it. I mean,
Carry
I'm a grammarian, so I don't like the use of a plural pronoun with a singular office,
Right.
for example.
Oh, you
No,
know,
no,
it's
no,
been
no,
done
no.
for hundreds of years, you know, it goes back to Shakespearean times.
I guess it would depend on how heavy a lift this is.
Right,
We could do it in two phases, like we could do chairman to chair, that would be a much lighter lift.
sure.
Nobody said that much, Miles.
I do type loudly.
The poppers, yeah. Typing away.
Translator, but I think I can go for 5 minutes.
So one other broad issue that I really started noticed reading through this, and then my thought is to then go back to the sections and talk about them, but is just as a concept and not to be said, but to the extent that the bylaws are repetitive in some circumstances to the charter. Sometimes there's a facility in having the language repeated so that the bylaw isn't kind of hanging out there and the reader's uninformed that the charter also addresses the same issue. But is there a discomfort with that, allowing that? Because the one downside of having two laws that address the same topic is they sometimes raise things differently. I mean, there's an unintended or perhaps an intended change in meaning. And so I just throw that out for discussion and something for people to think about.
Give me an example of that.
I didn't have a good example, but I should, and I expect we will, but I don't.
I feel like there's two ways that this could be handled. One way is to, as you're suggesting, remove it from the bylaws.
Mhm.
The other way is to harmonize it, fix it in the bylaws to make sure that it reflects exactly the charter. I guess I wonder if we remove something from the bylaws, if people would, not that people are like memorizing the bylaws, but if it suddenly disappears from the bylaw, does it communicate that it's
Oh,
no
And
longer
repealed,
in
yeah,
force?
yeah.
That
No.
it might not be what we want to communicate, so I don't know.
And I don't have a proposal, I'm not on that, I
Yeah.
just want to throw it out as
Yeah.
something to think about.
I mean, I've been on bylaw revision committee for like private clubs, right? And this isn't that, right? So I mean, I know we were gonna talk about the work plan, we're gonna do that
Yes.
after this. So we're gonna talk about the work and then the work plan. So, but
That's all right.
I just think we have to be mindful, to your point, I mean, these have been evolved over time and there were votes, there were laws, there was some reason, and I think we just have to be careful not to affect perception, right? That we're repealing something, or limiting rights, or doing something like that, just for the sake of
Right.
agreement.
Efficiency,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean,
No,
there's a history to every one of these lines, and they're often not grammatically correct, but we just have to, I think, be judicious and
Yep.
eliminate.
I think that's a fair point, and we should err on the side of leaving things as is unless we have a good reason to change them.
That's a good point.
I hadn't even realized until this conversation that there was the separate charter at the end of the bylaws document.
Yeah, we're gonna separate them out. They've been attached. They're two separate documents.
One thing I was thinking is how can you communicate to the reader of the bylaws that the subject matter is also in the charter? I don't know how you might do that, but the charter says who's elected and, what kinds of, how many members of the Board of Health there can be, and then the bylaw says how many we want, and that can be changed, but
Right,
if you don't go to look, you don't know that there's flexibility or,
that's,
so I don't know if that's a chart, something.
Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically, I don't volunteer to do this, but, you know, you could have like a crosswalk, that would link.
Yeah.
Bylaw provisions to
We love a
the
good. crosswalk.
authority within, you know, the charter. I've always. When I lecture about this, I always view the charter as our constitution.
Right.
And the bylaws as our, you know, our enacted legislation, so. You could come up with that. I mean, you wouldn't have to necessarily put citations in every
Right, yeah.
bylaw, but you could have a crosswalk that people could go to and say, oh, where's the authority for, you
Right.
know, this?
Miles has a new goal.
So is the charter in or out of scope of our, out, okay,
Because
Yeah.
that's a creature that we would need to go to the legislature to amend.
okay.
And typically you'd have a charter committee or charter commission, you know, to do that. That would be. Separately authorized.
Well, at least from my perspective, those are some general points I wanted to just throw out there and get some conversation going.
I think we should, I mean, one of the things I thought we would do, do, and maybe, I think we may have touched on this before, is just look for archaic things, right? I mean, things that we know, are
Right.
just not even relevant anymore.
Yeah.
And see whether or not we would make a recommendation to remove them at some point or modify them at some point.
Yeah. And an example of that is, I know it's outside of section 1, but in section 2.5, 1, 2.52 is just phraseology that in kind of a perverse sort of way, Kate and I talked to this, has become more relevant. But when you read the language, it's in terms of refuse and garbage, you know, it's referring to house dirt, ashes, garbage, refuse, garbage, grease, bones. You know, phraseology that's one doesn't think of as necessarily what's arising from our houses today. But in any event, that is an example of archaic phraseology that maybe we need to revisit. But when one looks, I mean, there is, if you look at the authority of the municipal authority for public health issues under the general laws, you instantly are into all that phraseology. So whether that would then suggest we were modified in some way that we didn't want to, I don't know, but that was an example that jumped out to me as kind of old phraseology that maybe we will take a look at.
And that's a good example of one you might want to send over to the Board of Health and say,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
what do you take this to mean and do you want that to be?
And have you used it in the past 10,
They
15,
do,
20
we
years?
register all the haulers through that, but that's not people here remember when we had garbage pickup, right? There were actually people who paid for garbage pickup,
No,
and they brought the garbage to the pig farm.
Yeah. Yeah, the subterranean things, step on me.
We did. Ash cans. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now residents bring their food waste to the
Right.
RTS
right.
in their own. bin.
Well, I do in small quantities. You know, but what? But anyway, so those are thoughts, but in terms of work plan, so how are we gonna do this? You know, we did this, so we talked a little bit about the work, but now the work plan. Because there is, I mean, even just from the conversations we had just now, there's a few different people, a few different attitudes, a few different comments, and bringing this together in a way that is productive is going to take some synergy, I guess. Maybe that's a word that applies to this. Sure, whatever we develop will evolve over time, as any group action does, but we'll need to. Oh, I was just noticing at 6:30. I guess we lost Connie.
She left at 6:29.
very precise.
It's in the minutes.
Um. But anyway, my own thought is that at least initially, we go through, section one, talk through each of these sections, see where we are, see if we can come to some consensus. And, but for our next session, that maybe what we do is, continue reading through the sections, but try to do it in a way that doesn't, that it maybe allows people to focus in particular ones. And one person necessarily say, I'll take section 2, I'll say, take section 3, so that we're being led a little bit rather than all over the landscape.
So can I ask a question about how things work in the municipal world? Because like in my day job, if we were doing this, we would put it up in a shared document like a Google Doc. Every one of us would independently like mark it up, put comments in, and then we'd all get together top to bottom and discuss the multi-person markup. I don't know if that is allowed in this type of public session.
No.
No, no.
Okay.
It is not.
But if a person was assigned responsibility for section 2, that person could come with their notes on section 2. And we could discuss section 2 in the context of their notes, which I think might be a way to get there, that works in a public setting, but doesn't.
If you do that approach, you might want to split into two people. It's a really big.
Fair, fair.
Right, just so I understand your suggestion, are you suggesting almost like a seminar format? So like if next week is section 2, you have a leader, the discussion for that week, and then the following meeting is section
Yes.
3, and you have a leader, is that what
Yeah,
you're suggesting?
That's what I'm throwing out for
Mhm.
conversation. I mean, but. You know, none of this is in stone. It's certainly 100% out for discussion and deal with people. If think that's not going to be productive.
I think that would be productive. And I think it would get the discussion going, and then we see if there's a theme of something that's, everybody wants to change within her section. And then everybody kind of be catching it from a different section, you know what I mean, instead of going through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which can be.
I just, when people do that, right, I mean, would it help? If as a committee, we kind of came up with at least a minimum checklist of sort of things to look for. So like, are there anachronistic, content? Is there, on the gender point, is there a gender issue, chair,
Yeah.
or even going further, in that respect? I'm not saying this is the checklist, I'm just saying,
Yeah, yeah.
if we came up as a group with a checklist and say, look for these things. And then, if you want to look for more, but.
Right.
At least have a sort of fundamental kind of work plan or
That's a
checklist
good
of
idea.
things that.
Yeah.
People could say and say, yes, I reviewed half of section 2 and I didn't see any anachronistic content. I didn't see any obvious errors in wording or, sort of, disagreement within sentences or something, or contradictions, or. I'm just thinking if we had that little plan, each of us could then apply it uniformly. And then open it up to discussion.
It's brilliant.
Do the different sections have dependencies? Like is section 3, does it expect you to have read section 2, or can you read?
Most part.
Okay, so they're discrete.
Right. Consensus on that. So I think what we should do is, since Connie's not here, Connie should be in charge of the section.
That's how you got to be chair.
But, and my thought is, I think, your checklist idea is a great idea, Michael. I think my thought is we talk through section 1 now. We have a few things that are on that checklist from the obvious points that we've talked about already, but we may trip over other things as we go here and say, well, wait a minute, that should be added to it, and I'm sure that must be.
So do you want us to tell you sections we want to do?
Oh, God. Great. Is that a volunteer?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do 3 or 5. Or both.
Good God. Well,
The select board has also set a goal to do a, not just a over holistic review of 5, but a more in-depth view of 5, but that's just. for
Oh,
information.
that's right. Yeah.
But that's, you should still do
Yeah.
that for this.
I'm happy to volunteer for 2. I'll take a hot potato,
The whole thing,
sure.
notwithstanding
Unless you-
Kate's comments that it
Unless
was.
you wanna subdivide it,
No.
but
Well, if
it's
you're,
not that long,
And I don't have to have 2 sections, I just am saying.
yeah,
there was one.
it's very nice.
20 pages. It's nothing.
Well, being a very productive meeting. Yeah. The, we're gonna-
I don't mind which ones, I can do that. But the idea would be the person leading the discussion. We wouldn't necessarily go through every single thing. The person leading the discussion would point to the areas that the checklist said was a
Well-
problem, in a sense, like if the checklist included anachronistic language, you would say, we see it here. If it includes internal inconsistencies, we see it here, but we don't necessarily have to go through, and it would take a long time.
I think that's
to Go
right.
through everything.
No, that's right, but the person. The chair, the person who's responsible for that section would have been responsible to read it, think
Yes,
about
yes,
it.
yes.
And,
To screen.
have their markups
Right.
as to this is where,
Mhm.
this is where I think we need to focus. And then others, of course, hopefully will have read it too and said, well, gee, I also think in subsection 7, we should do X. And
So you have one detail reader and organizer, and then everyone else is more of a lighter reader and
Exactly.
bringing things. Sounds great.
I think for your checklist, you should have something that like, I don't know, clarity, or there's things I don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
So, somebody else might know.
because I'm not sure
I just
there
made
isn't
a little
anything in
list.
there that you don't.
Well, the word day means something different in so many different statutes. I was saying this to Louise earlier. So we were noting in the charter that it was really clear under section 13 what days were what days. And I think in other times we have days we might want to say, just so that future people
Yeah.
know that 14 days means actual calendar days or with or without.
Oh,
Saturday, Sundays, and
business
holidays.
day, well, yeah, not a phrase this we use here, but yes,
But they do exclude, some exclude Saturdays, Sundays and holidays.
Yeah.
some exclude
Yeah.
Just Sundays. and holidays.
So, Ron, maybe,
Yes.
I just was trying to jot down just a few that we might want to consider for a checklist, and I think we've talked about most of them. Anachronistic language,
Right.
internal contradictions, that
Yeah.
can cause confusion within a particular bylaw. The gender neutrality issue, there were 2 phased approach to that. The first, I think, like Eric said, maybe the low hanging fruit of chair and then other issues that are in that same category. Clarity
Right.
on for vagueness or ambiguity, as Kate indicated. And then the last, I don't know if we wanted to add it, but it would be in the eyes of the beholder, like sort of any omissions, sort of a lack of reach, that the reader said, geez, it would have been nice if they had, added another line or something. But those are 5 points, but again, I just throw those out there as an organizing principle to be discussed.
And maybe archaism, I don't know what term you would use, but does something need to be brought to new modern standards,
Right.
Yeah,
definition of some sort?
that's true. Yeah, because you could think about, Kate, might be able to educate us, right? We think of, if it was something here about pigs grazing on the common, then she'd say, hey, there's somebody that looks for a permit. So, we don't know
Right.
what anachronistic means, but I guess archaic, it can be a separate
Think about it.
Yeah.
approach.
And we did, and it's not in here yet, we did take a bunch of those out, like sale of cigarettes by machine, which is
Yeah.
illegal now. Well, not illegal, it's a violation of the
Violation of law.
health regulations, by law. We took that out, but it's here, so Miles has been sending you information about changes that we've made in the last 5 years. Right, it was in the calendar
It
invite?
was in the calendar, but we have it pulled up if we need to reference.
Excel,
Yes, sir.
yeah, I saw that. That was helpful.
And all of those miles are reflected in the PDF, or are some not reflected in the PDF?
Some are not reflected in the PDF, and there's a column to say whether they are reflected or not.
Okay. Missed that, thank you.
So one other thing that we had discussed in the committee to create this committee was inconsistencies across sections. That's trickier. I don't know if that's something we do at the end, once we've gone through all the sections,
Mhm.
or.
I think. I mean, obviously, we should be aware of it as we're going, but I
Yeah.
think,
That can be part of the
It's-
discussion when people are presenting their sections, though, right? And they can say, this refers to this other section, and then the person who had that other section might be able to, I don't know, that works kind of off,
Yeah.
we're gonna be able to identify where it would bump into something else, I would think.
and in my.
Does that make sense? Or,
Yeah, I mean, I think it may not refer, though, you know what I mean? It may not refer at all. It may just be that they were, two things were adopted at different times.
Oh, okay.
Without, you know. Just a little messier than that.
Right, right. These
So
are,
Miles, can I ask you a question now? For the ones that say no in the 2022 bylaws, like there's a couple that are in my section, section 2. Like toward the third and fourth from the bottom.
Mhm.
How should I factor those into my review?
So the text of those, of the new revised sections would be directly pulled from the warrant articles.
Okay,
We've got the town meeting date, whether it's annual or special, and which article that was.
so I basically do it, kind of construct it myself.
Correct.
Okay.
There are some, and in the notes, we've got some that were amended by town meeting, on the floor. So for example, last year's, single-use plastic, ban. We've got some that, were not fully adopted, because of the AG saying, no, you can't actually fully adopt this as written, with some segments. And if those are part of your sections,
Just call us.
call us. We're hunting down the letters from the AGs as well
Okay.
that specifically state what has been pulled and not pulled.
And we're working with Louise to have an updated version, but there's been more elections than we expected.
All right, so basically, in terms of the process, you're reviewing your own section, but you have to be sure to look at the ones that say no for in this document and factor those into your review. Great.
But we do have all of the AG
Yeah.
bylaws with any edits by the AG.
Yeah, so we could get those out.
So
to whoever
those
has
can
them.
be distributed.
Yes.
Mhm.
well, that's right. You must, on a
Yeah.
working basis, you have that.
We just have to digitize them and get.
Well, listen, we have 2 or 3 fronts going at once, but in terms of going through, we started. This notion of people signing up for certain sections. My thoughts, Kathy, since Kate says that the sign bylaw is gonna be gone through carefully by the select board. Do you mind doing that? Cause that seems like it's gonna be repetitious.
Like I said, I have to go to Park and Rec, but
Right.
just to throw a curveball.
Yeah.
You might want to assign section 1 and
I
as
think
opposed to
so.
doing like when everybody. took
No,
their
no,
notes.
no, I think that's.
And whoever has it, I'll send them my notes.
I think that's a great idea. I'm happy to take section. I'm happy
I know
to, so if you said.
Sorry, I have to go to Rosemary. I'll try not to
Okay.
do this next time.
So that. So fair.
So the only thing I would say about section 1
Yes,
is that it primarily concerns the moderator and the town clerk.
it does, it does. You two
That's all
wanna take that as a
that's-
coach? You two wanna take that as a coach?
No, I mean, I was thinking of staying away from it, you know.
For the, exactly that reason, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at least in the first instance, okay.
Yeah.
yeah, but then that would apply to assigning
I
that to
have.
her, or to,
A lot of,
for the bylaw, or for the sign
Specific.
bylaw. Like maybe giving. a
Well,
different
except that I know
perspective
that
than
you
what's-
guys are actively
Yeah.
planning
Able to,
to
but I'm
do,
just saying-
you're a wheel in motion, at the moment. at least my thought.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually affect what we do, you know what I mean, like,
Yeah.
whereas section 1 affects your, got it.
Yeah.
But
I hear
as
that.
in the role.
Got it.
So we'll still contribute, we're not recusing ourselves, we'll still contribute.
Yeah.
Okay,
Views
no,
on-
but I'll take one and I need to. correct me as I'm going through the various comments. No, you can't do it.
No, we definitely, we'll do that.
The, okay, so we have one, three, so we're up. Hesitating on the wetlands because they think that's gonna be it. It's very short.
I can do the wetlands.
You want to do it?
I'd love to do the wetlands.
Because that's gonna be a lot of overlap with the Wetlands Protection Act. But the, let's see.
I mean, you're an environmental lawyer.
I know, that's why I was gonna take
You
it.
wanna do the, all right, go ahead, you do it, that's fine, I just didn't wanna overburden you.
No, I'll take that,
You'll take it,
Yeah, I'll take that. You wanna do, stormwater then, Michael?
stormwater,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes, I will.
We'll see. All
Lucky seven, I'll do it,
right, thank you. Thank you.
very important issue, actually, as we all know.
It is.
It is.
Especially in this town, but it's actually topography.
Well, and that's also one that there's a committee that's looking at changing this bylaw.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes,
for the reasons that are obvious.
Yes, yes.
right. I'm gonna ask Connie if I'll reach out to Connie if she's willing to do Article 4, licenses and permits. And that would get us to penalties. And penalties, I think, Chris, you all are active on.
Penalties, we just redid all of, at the. end.
Last year.
Right.
Last year, at the,
Right.
I.
That's for 2023. So that should be the table. And the amounts of the fines. And the way that they're presented is essentially brand new.
Right,
And I believe the article that redid the table also. Included a new version of 8.1 and 8.2. So not to say someone shouldn't take a look at it, but that was
right,
comprehensively redone a year and a half ago.
right.
Yeah, wasn't it proposed and then it was withdrawn and then it was.
Oh, that was-
And 2023 annual polled and then
Yeah.
voted at the special in October.
Way to do things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, I mean,
Right.
I know, but I mean, I think it was the product of some pretty intense scrutiny and care.
Right, so I think that's our lightest lift is section 8. And 9, frankly, I want to defer to 9, because God knows where we'll be on 9 after we've gone through the first 8. Just in terms of, do we need it, do we not need it, do we need to change it a lot? I just defer to that.
Okay, can you just go through the assignments then?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay.
please.
So section 1 is Ron, me, section 2 is Eric. 3, we started off with, year 3,
Me?
yeah, and then Connie is 4, well, possibly. Connie. Kathy is 5. Ron has 6. Michael has 7. 8, we're kind of light on because we just did it. Not that we shouldn't look at it, but
Sorry, who's doing for?
Connie, hopefully,
Okay.
I'll reach out to Connie.
Spencer, what did you assign me?
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna
What do
read
you-
them all anyway,
No,
but,
well, do you want to do 4?
and Connie will do,
Then we'll ask Connie to take a look, since she's not in the room, I feel good. Ask Connie to take a look at 8. Does that work for you, Louise?
half of that is also town clerk
Actually,
licenses, just.
It is.
I'm sorry.
I think we've abandoned that position.
Okay, we're adding that, okay, I said half of 4 is also the town clerk's license.
Oh, no, I realize that the turf is your turf.
Small town.
All right. That's not much. So actually, so in terms of work product, my thought is we'll go through these. I think everybody was loosely comfortable with meeting every 2 weeks, so we do one every 2 weeks and see where we go.
I thought the calendar invite was monthly.
It's.
My mistake.
I think it was monthly because,
Yeah, it was.
I don't think there's 2 Mondays.
we went through that.
You're right, you're
Work.
right, my mistake.
So I think just putting together the list of like who the people are and their assignments, right?
Right.
And then the checklist that
Right.
Michael suggested, and then also kind of what sections will be presenting at what meeting.
Right,
So that, because they might not go in order if somebody's not available.
of course.
So I just think that would be good. And then that, just all the documentation, we probably all need to like figure out our
Where we're
timeframes
going.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly,
so
yes.
the only caveat I would say is if there are specific subsections that someone who's read through thinks need to be discussed, I think we need to let folks on the committee know before the meeting. Otherwise, it's going to be a whole other month
Fair enough, that's a good idea.
before we come back and look at those specific subsections.
And I think we can just do that by an email, but
The person to the chair
yes,
requesting that certain subsections be part
right,
of.
draw
the discussion.
attention to
Right,
these 3
without-
sections and we can alert the committee members that.
Could you please look at those carefully?
Exactly. I think it's a great idea.
Do we have a editable version of this, like a Word document?
I'm sorry.
I mean, presumably there's something other than the PDF.
You could probably let it PDF then.
Yeah, but I want to be able to change words for myself in my section as a proposal for.
I will
what-
see what I
what we
have.
can bring.
I can send
So I
you.
want to put track changes on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you do or do not want to put tractors?
I do.
I
for
would, I
myself.
would have thought. so,
For
yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
As I'm going through it, such that I can bring this up for discussion, saying that I think that we should change X to Y and be able to, like, for example, have it up on the screen as a starting point.
Here's a little project. Yes.
Can I just go through this list one more time, just to make sure that
Absolutely.
we're all in agreement that that's kind of, and again, it's only a starting point, right? But I think it's important that we have some kind of uniform filter that we're looking at these with, and then we can go off and anything we want. So the first was sort of anachronistic content, and I think by that we mean kind of the, pigs grazing on the town common. We're talking about content. Separately, second, I think we said archaic language, right? Third, internal contradictions or inconsistencies within the bylaw of that section of the bylaw. 4, sort of modernization, gender neutrality, chair, those issues that we talked about. The 5th would be clarity or ambiguity in, a subjective sort of assessment of the content to see if it like days, that Kate mentioned as a problem. Omissions, if we think there's content or, it's not our role, but if we made observations that maybe this ought to go farther, or maybe this ought to have something else. And then the last was inconsistency across the bylaws.
Right.
I just throw those out there as the 7 points.
In terms of omissions, are we thinking about an omission as a cousin of clarity? Like, I've read this far, but I'm unclear on whether this other thing is encompassed, or are you actually thinking of something more substantive?
I guess I was thinking of, while we're looking at it, something more substantive. So, I don't know, let me give you an example. So, for example, I know we've had a couple of times with town meeting that in section 1, the bylaw is very mandatory on the days on which town meeting can be held after it's adjourned. And we've had a few situations come up, some of them involving me, I don't know, my daughter's college
I
graduation.
remember that.
But anyway, but things like that. And so I'm just saying an omission would be, in someone's opinion, looking at it. And I'm not suggesting a change there.
Yeah.
And we've lived with it ever since. It's fine. But, maybe we ought to have more flexibility. Maybe it would be better to have more flexibility on those adjournment dates or something like that. That's what I mean by
Right.
an omission. That's in I have in my head, but I'm happy to
No, no, it's just-
expand the definition more, but and I was just thinking that, something like, hey, might make sense to have this go a little farther or have another.
Yeah,
angle to it.
I think we should be careful, just because there was a big concern again, and we used to remember this in our origin committee, that we would not be some sort of like shadow docket.
Right.
Kind of entity, you know,
Yeah,
No, I mean, there is certainly the view that
Yeah.
one can,
but
once you
we-
start editing, you can.
Yeah.
Once-
But
when do you
that's why I
stop?
think we also added that if something was within the purview of a committee or a board, it would be referred to them if we came up with some thoughts or had some suggestions about language. We would then refer it back to that committee. But I
Yeah.
think
absolutely.
if we already know that it's something, you know,
I
good,
agree. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think we don't want to, they would just, we don't have to do them. But I was just thinking, if we're
Yeah.
going to the trouble of doing it, if people had I would call them
Yeah.
observations.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
And nothing more than that.
No, and I think in my mind, that's something we ought to be, two things. One, editorial omissions, and then two, more substantive omissions that ought to be noted to the relevant committee.
I will call out what I think is a bit of an elephant in the room related to section 1 on anachronism. We saw it all over Facebook in the last votes, which is recorded electronic voting at town meeting. We will get flack if we adjust some anachronisms, but don't at least take a stance on electronic voting. That's an opinion, but an informed opinion.
I would say that seems to me like the kind of substantive thing that, you know. People were afraid we would hijack everything on this committee. Just
So I
because,
just wanted, I mean,
you know, I don't know.
insofar as we're talking about anachronisms and archaic, there are a significant population of the town who thinks that voice voting falls under the definition of anachronistic and archaic. I'm not gonna take a stance. I have taken a stance, but I'm not gonna take a stance in this room. And I think that if we're going to consider correctly, in my view, one of the criteria that we're looking at is anachronistic or archaic. I think we need to have a stance on this, and we could say our stance is it's not in our purview. But I think not saying anything is going to lead to negative comments from the floor of town meeting when this is presented.
And since I didn't follow Facebook, let me just ask, what the issue is that because town meeting votes are not electronically recorded.
There's no
that
accountability.
was-
No one knows how I vote.
Notwithstanding that there is the ability to have roll call votes.
Correct. I've been on 18 years, and the only time that was done in 18 years was for the golf course.
But it exists.
It exists,
Okay.
but no one knows.
But
about it.
that's the issue. I
That is-
don't want
that
to
is
debate
it
the
is-
issue. I
right,
just
it is
want to understand.
accountability.
Yeah.
And
Wait,
you'll-
but you said, but nobody knows about it, then why don't we just tell people about it? And then they know it's an option.
it's an option for town meeting. It's not an option if you're a registered voter.
They can ask their town meeting.
They can.
Yeah, that's how that's supposed to work,
But-
right? Representative.
Well, but you can find out how your elected representative in the legislature voted on every single vote.
Because it's elect,
Because.
because it's
because they don't
electronic.
do roll
Yeah.
call.
Yeah,
Doesn't
yeah,
have to
so,
be, oh,
so,
Doesn't have to be electronic, it has to be recorded. But I don't think we're gonna do a roll call for every vote.
and other communities do electronic anonymously.
I think, yeah,
other committees do electronic and non.
Other
Yes.
communities, some.
Oh, communities,
Yes.
okay, I was trying to think what committees it's on.
No, communities.
yeah, I mean, I don't mean to hijack things, especially at. the
No,
end, But I think that we need to, I think we should make a decision on whether or not we consider that in scope or out of scope of what we're attempting to do here. It certainly came up in the town meeting study committee of, I don't know, what, 10 years ago or so?
I think we have a section on that, right, in section 1?
There's also a statute.
No.
Yeah, there is.
We're
Do
governed
we
by,
need a whole?
we're governed by our bylaws and chapter 39.
And I think state law too. That's rules on.
Yeah, exactly. And there may be very good reasons why it can't be done, and we should just be open about those.
Duly noted. Are there other items people want to address before we, move on? I mean, I think we've accomplished a plan of work here and,
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind me asking Mr. Key again to just list down the number of checklists. I have 6 and I believe you had 7, just for the minutes, because that seemed important and actionable.
Maybe I miscounted. Anachronistic content, and I mean, I'm using the, something like the pigs grazing on the town common. Archaic language. Internal contradictions within the bylaw. Gender neutrality. Clarity or ambiguity within the bylaw. Omissions, which maybe we should scratch. And then inconsistency across all bylaws.
Very good, thank you.
You're welcome. Is that 7?
I blended the first 2.
It's understandable, but I was trying to make that, I think it merits a distinction,
right, no, and I think.
This covers something that never happens anymore, right?
Right.
Versus this is worded in a way that is ancient.
I think it's worth also just putting a reminder on that list of 7 to check the spreadsheet to make sure that your section
Fair enough.
may
Yeah.
get changed out from under you.
Actually, I have one thought just regarding the work plan,
Yes,
since we always want to work backwards. If we get through, each one of these once a month, and I don't know if we're gonna meet so often in the summer.
Sure.
Maybe we should just work backwards from our intended finish date and make sure,
oh. Yeah, no, I think,
that we'll
well, I think
where we are, and then what do we have? We probably have some work to do after we've gone through all these, right?
I think it'd be, yes, absolutely, and, I can't believe that there won't be some need to kick things, some comments out to some substantive committees, and then we'll have to hear back from them, so that will be a loop process.
Right.
And
And if we're aiming for May town meeting
next year,
26.
Yeah.
Then we really have to be done in
A
February,
year from now.
yeah, we've got 12 months roughly,
so just a thought,
so we
you
just
know, when
lost our
we're
summer.
doing that work plan that we.
It's 2 meetings, one in July and one in August.
You're right. No, but I mean, I think. I think it's a great comment, but I think we'll be on track to be done. 8 sections, playing it out, that'll put us done more or less Thanksgiving. And then there'll be a loop process, which in my mind, the loops would be started earlier. So let's say that we come to wetlands and we've done that in September. There's no point to wait, going to kick that out to the Conservation Commission and then say, what are your thoughts on these 8 points? But I think you're absolutely right, we have to check that. But my thought is to develop a schedule. Following up on this conversation with the checklist and laying that out, but I think we should be okay.
And what is the deliverable?
That's
In your view, Mr. Chair?
My view is on the assumption that we'll have some proposed changes, that the deliverable will be a proposed revision to the bylaw. How it's presented, I want to just take a walk on it for the moment, but a proposed revision to the bylaw reflecting the view of this committee, hopefully not a controversial view, but we'll find out. But a proposed bylaw that would then be set up and available for action the annual town meeting. If we have a report that says we've looked through it and everything's perfect, then that will be a shorter deliverable. But that's my view.
So we do this every 10 years, so this should be,
5 years.
I thought it was ending,
Is it 10?
ending, the year ending.
10 year.
You're right. That's confusing. So in theory, like I'm looking at the annual town meeting warrant for 2016, but I don't see anything here. I mean, in
This
theory.
didn't exist.
We did-
We
we're
just
the
started
first.
this.
Oh.
That's why we're dealing with the pigs.
Okay, I'm like, I should remember this. I should have gone through this before. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it's been done in any organized way. And
Okay.
I think that you guys were part of that planning. I think it was right, Johnny, you said other towns do it every 10 years. and-
Right.
All right, so the closest model we have is what we were just discussing about the, that we did a year and a half ago about the,
That's true.
yes,
The
exactly.
non-criminal.
The non-criminal dispositions, yes.
And then I've talked with Kate Miles about seeing what work product other towns have developed.
Right, and I haven't had a chance to read the native one yet.
And perhaps there will be other models. We'll just leave it at that,
Yeah.
the native model. But we'll see what else we get. But just, so we're not inventing the wheel.
Right.
Hopefully we're,
So I could try, if town council agrees, Chris, to go through what we've already received from the AG and try to conform to this early with what we already have, so that everybody has an updated document that they're working off of rather than pieces of document.
Sure.
Okay, there were a lot already so far
Of,
this year of bylaw changes. So we can do that.
Great.
If that's okay.
that would be super.
Yeah.
That would be super.
Okay.
Thank you.
We should allow the town clerk to correct typographical errors. In the bylaw.
Thank you.
Yes. I'll make that motion.
You can fix the number.
I can fix the numbering, but it didn't say anything about letter typographical errors.
Any other business that people have, proposals or discussion topics? We have a motion. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
well,
If you do roll call.
We need a roll?
are we still hybrid?
No,
We're
no,
not.
well, we're not.
Oh, you're right, we're off hybrid.
We should do a roll.
You
call.
should
You
do.
want to
roll call.
prefer?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Eric, you're welcome to vote.
Hi.
Fee votes aye.
Louise Miller. Yeah.
Karen Calton, yes. Happy Dowd, yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, thanks, everybody.